All right, welcome to another edition of Ranking the Albums, and we are ranking today none other than Twisted Sister. And to bringing in a friend that we did Poison on our last hair metal series, and none other than Chris Kiebzak. Welcome, or should I say, welcome
How's
back?
everybody doing? How you doing, Joe?
Good.
Yeah,
All right.
something like that. Yep, just braving this snowstorm that's hitting Buffalo again, as I'm sure you are.
Yeah, it's crazy with all this snow. That's what happens when we have good Novembers and Decembers with no snow. It comes back to bite us in January.
Yeah, for
All
sure.
right, so we got five albums to do today, so that's a quick one. It won't take too long, and we're gonna rank our top five. Why don't you give me a rundown on how you got into Twisted Sister or how you came across these guys?
Just the fact of Kiss and Alice Cooper being my idols since 5 years old when my dad described them to me, and then I went out and had to figure everything out about them. I mean, Twisted Sister was just one of those bands that people immediately talked about after Kiss and Alice Cooper, and that's Wasp, Twisted Sister. And Motley Crue for a long time was in that conversation. While I don't look at Motley as theatrical as some people do, but as far as Wasp, Twisted Sister, the makeup and everything, VH1 was huge with everything hair metal when I was growing up. So Twist, I don't know exact. I remember the first time I ever seen them was my grandmother rented Pee-wee's Big Adventure for me and my brother when we were probably, geez, 6, 7 years old. So I remember seeing them. I don't know if that had any, without the internet at that time, I don't know if that had anything to do with me discovering them, but I definitely remember, oh, that's the band from Pee-wee's Big Adventure. So that's sort of how that started out. And then I was able to see them when I was probably 16 years old at the Biker Fest that I know you were at in downtown Buffalo. And then, yeah, at that point, I'd already deep dived into everything and I was learning to play guitar around that time that I found Twisted Sister. And as we all know, no harm intended. Like musically, they're pretty on the simple spectrum compared to some of the other bands from that time. So, yeah, Twisted Sister was always in, my top 10 bands from that era for sure.
Yeah, but sometimes simple is good. So, all right, yeah. So I remember
Yeah,
ba
totally. Yeah.
basically basically I remember when Stay Hungry came out, and I heard We're Not Gonna Take It. That's like the song. I mean, I heard of them before then, but I really didn't pay much attention to them. I had like You Can't Stop Rock and Roll on this metal compilations cassette called Masters of Metal. And that was the first time I heard them, but I never really got into them until Stay Hungry came out. Obviously, that's when most of the people that were around that time, that's the album they always cite as the one that got them into the band. And sure enough, I went back and got the rest of the catalog, and the rest is history. It's just a shame that a few years later they were history. So, um,
Right.
unfortunately, but I think they made the mistake of, which we'll probably get into when we start talking about the albums real quick, is their follow up to Stay Hungry was the problem, and that's what really killed them, unfortunately. Had
Right.
they had something like You Can't Stop Rock and Roll as the follow up, who knows how long they could have gone. They could have kept going and going, but in those days, if you had a really big album and didn't follow it up right away with something, equally as good or at least sold a million copies, you were done. There was just no way, no two ifs, ands, or buts about it. And as you'll learn, Love is for Suckers wasn't even going to be a Twisted Sister album. It was going to be a Dee Snider solo album, but um, the record company wouldn't release it unless they put it under Twisted Sister's name. So that's how that album even came to be, or else we would be talking about four albums right now. So, all
Right. Right.
right, well, let's dig in. What do you got for your number five?
All right. So my number five is Love is for Suckers, 1987. Obviously, they went in a completely different direction, and obviously the choices made before that had a lot to do with it too. But um, yeah, they weren't really coming back from that one. I mean, it's apparent why that was their last record. I think all the fans at that point said they were done. It has its, you know, Wake Up is a good song. Sleeping Giant, I think, is good. One Bad Habit, I always liked listening to, but other than that, it's pretty much filler and sort of entirely filler if you compare to the other records, anyways. So yeah, that's definitely my number five. Nothing really too memorable on that one.
Okay. And obviously that's also my number five, so we agree
Yeah,
on
yeah,
that one.
I figured it would be.
Um, but I'm not gonna be as harsh on it. I mean, I think the beginning of the album is really good, and then it kind of starts getting they loaded it up in the beginning. The better songs are early on, which is good if you're playing a CD or an album because you don't have to really skip tracks. But then once you flip over to the other side, that's when you're definitely gonna be skipping some tracks. Obviously, I think the only song that I really knew when I bought it was "Wake Up the Sleeping Giant" because I heard that it was one of those songs that the radio. I think it was Q107 in Toronto at that time. We didn't really have a really rock station in '87. We were more because we lost 97 Rock in '85, so we really didn't have a rock station, so we were kind of, you know, starved for stuff. So you had to listen to Q107 to even get stuff back then. Um, but Hot Love is another good song. Tonight's definitely one of the better songs on the album if you're familiar with that one.
Yeah, yeah. No, 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 that's a good point. Yeah, tonight's a pretty good song. Yeah, for sure.
So I
That's
mean there's
definitely
some good stuff on here. I think the more you listen to it, I think the better you'll like it. But you're still not going to like it as good as the other albums, and that's the reason why it's where it's at,
well, I
unfortunately.
guess where I'm at on it is like that's an album. Like I said, when I was able to get into their discography and really check them out, every record that we're talking about, it was out.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
that album to me, when I was younger, it just didn't click, and I thought over time it would, especially after re-listening to most of the tracks. Some I skipped through a little bit, but I got myself re re-familiar with the material, and yeah, it still hasn't clicked. So, and again, I go every couple years, I go through their discography. They're a real easy band to sort of go through everything quick. So,
And of note, obviously, the drumming on this album was done by Joey Franco, so the AJ Perro was out
that's
of the
right.
band at that point. So, but other than
That's
that,
right.
it was the four other guys. So,
Yeah.
all right, let's get your number four going. What do you got for that?
All right. So number four, originally I was going to put You Can't Stop Rock and Roll, but after re-listening to everything, Come Out and Play, which again I think is sort of an underrated album. It's sometimes spoken about as the least favorite of the bunch. Maybe, well, Love is for Suckers is sort of always right there, but um, no, I love a lot of the songs on there. Fire Still Burns was the first song. That and Burning Hell were the first two songs I really remember loving. Like, wow, this is amazing. Fire Still Burns is by far my top two to three favorite Twisted Sister songs. But yeah, I mean, even some of the ones in Be Cruel to Your School, which was another one of the first ones because of Alice. That may have been how I actually first was like, I have to check out Twisted Sister. May have been the Be Cruel to Your School song, which it didn't really do any chart here in the US, right? If I'm not mistaken, overseas it did hit I think it did hit the charts a little bit, but it didn't over here.
Right.
And then Leader of the Pack that I know all Twisted Sister fans are iffy on. But my mom was a huge fan of that song, so I knew that song very well as a kid. So when I realized that they played it shortly after discovering their catalog, that song still makes me happy to hear it. My mom hated that cover version. She hated the cover version of Twisted Sister doing that, but she loved Leader of the Pack, so that still makes me smile every time I hear it. For that, that's a win. So Come On and Play would be number four.
All right. So my number four, surprise, surprise, is going to be Under the Blade.
Mm.
Yeah.
That is a surprise.
Yeah. Well, the thing I'm looking at here is, and I just did a double take because I couldn't remember. I had it all, written down and ready to go and everything. And I'm looking back. I was trying to think what my number four was, and I had to look again. I go, wow. But Under the Blade, yeah, the thing about Under the Blade is it kicks off in fine style. I mean. it kicks off with the song that they always open their concerts with, and what you don't know, great song, and it goes right into Bad Boys of Rock and Roll, great 1-2 punch. But for some reason, for me, the other songs on the album are either decent or so-so, and that's kind of why it kind of fell where it fell.
Right.
It's unfortunate, but and when I start letting you know exactly what happens in the other albums, then people will see why it's where it's at, because there's just so much more going on in the other albums that I like more. But having said that, this is definitely a high end number four in my book. It's like, had they released four more albums, I doubt any four more albums would top this album, because that's how good this one is. I mean,
Right.
but the only problem is the three that I like in front of it are just that good that
Right.
it relegated Under the Blade to number four, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, it does.
So, and that's the problem when if you got a lot of albums to rank, it's even tougher. But when you only got a minimal amount of albums, somebody's got to be number four, and that's the one that it came in at. So
Right.
Under the Blade, number four. So it's going to take us to number three for you. What do you got?
Yep, number three for me would be Can't Stop Rock and Roll. Now that album came out in what? That came out in the UK first in April, right? So did you hear anything about that record before it actually came out here in the States? Were you already familiarized with them or no?
No, like I said, the only reason I knew even of the song "You Can't Stop Rock and Roll" was
Oh yeah.
it was on some compilation cassette I had called Masters of Metal,
Right, right.
and I it didn't that song really didn't do anything for me when I first heard it, just because the other songs on the Masters of Metal, I mean, I couldn't even tell you what was on it now. That goes so far back, but I do believe it had a Wasp song on it.
Yeah, I actually think I have that comp on vinyl behind me somewhere.
Mean Streak, I think, by Y&T is on it. So it's a
Yes.
really good compilation. But I think because You Can't Stop Rock and Roll was kind of near the end of it, I didn't really pay it a lot of attention. Because when you're on cassette, you always usually play them from the beginning, and those are the songs usually you hear the most. Um, and then, like I said, it wasn't until Stay Hungry came out that I was really that really made me a fan of the band. So, but
Right.
yeah, I would guess, yeah, it probably came out earlier overseas.
Yeah, I thought that was a little interesting. I mean, the album's rocking all the way through. I mean, it was the second record. My standout tracks for me are Kids Are Back, Ride to Live is a great song. I'll Take You Alive, and You Can't Stop Rock and Roll, and Like a Knife in the Back too, I think is an underrated gem on that record. Um, yeah, just big sound. I think it's great production. Yeah, definitely. I definitely feel it deserves to be in that top three standing. So, what do you got for number? What is it? Two,
My number
three.
three
Your three.
is Come Out and Play. And
Did I lose you?
nope, this album gets a lot of bad bad gets a bad rap, unfortunately. It's better than what people make it out to be. Um, some people say that this album, they think it's not that great because it didn't do good, and it's got the cover song on, which totally killed it. But if you really listen to the music, I Believe in Rock and Roll, I Believe in You, that's a great song. What a great ballad. Looking Out for Number One was another song that they used to play on the uh, Q107. So that was one that I was actually always familiar with. The opening song, Come Out and Play, of course, was great. Kill or Be Killed, Leader of the Pack, is what kind of killed it in a way, because they didn't really have a good secondary follow-up single to it.
Well, because that was the first single, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And Be Cruel to Your School was the second. You know, the thing that's weird, sad is that at the time, this was like pretty much right before Alice Cooper made his big comeback. So
Yeah.
had Cooper already came out with Poison or the Trash album before this album came out, I think maybe that song would have done better, you know. But the problem was this was way before that, like by 2 years. I believe
Yeah.
87 was Trash,
Well, 89 was trash.
89, 5 years
Eight,
difference. Wow,
80,
4 years.
86 and 87 was Raise Your Fist and Constrictor with Kane Roberts.
Yep.
That was him coming back off of the drug stuff with those four Weird albums, Zipper Catch a Skin and all those. But yeah, and yeah, you're right. It probably would have made a big difference in 89 because his career was there and stable and came back from 86 to 89. But once Trash dropped and Poison came out, there was a different game. It brought him right up to who the top selling artists of that year were.
Yep. So, that and they had a video for it too, and it still didn't even do good.
Yeah,
I don't know
they did.
why. That was kind of strange, but
Yeah.
but the album, like I mentioned, those songs that I mentioned there definitely are what make this just a little bit better of an album than Under the Blade for me. I know Under the Blade is more of a heavier album. This album's a little bit more softer. And the weird thing was the guy who produced Come Out and Play was none other than Dieter Dierks, who was known for producing the Scorpions back
Oh
in
yeah.
like
Right.
their late 70s into the 80s there. So, um, it just I think they just picked the wrong song there to lead off the album, with the first single, Come Out and Play. I mean, memorable. Everybody saw the video numerous times. It was everywhere on MTV, but for some reason, just the lack of a second solid single and, other songs, that's what really killed that album. The album did about as good as the song Leader of the Pack did. I think if they did I Believe in You as a single, I think that would have helped it a little bit. I really love that song. That's probably one of my top five Twisted Sister songs, believe it or not.
Yeah,
Um,
I definitely think they missed the mark with doing a feature. I thought, I mean, again, I was born in '88, so it's 2 years after that came out, but I feel like the song itself is good. It's a little cheesy, and putting Alice in there after him being out of the main limelight and almost, playing to 400 or 500 people a night, I think adding that in sort of messed with them a little bit. Even as a diehard Cooper fan, I thought it was weird when I was a kid when I seen that video. It just didn't. It seemed cheesy to me for some reason with him being in it. I don't know why. So,
all right, so there's number three. So what do you got for number two?
all right, number two, I have Stay Hungry. I think that's one of the hardest rocking records that they have besides my number one pick. But yeah, I mean, it was produced by Tom Werman, who done many, many records that me and you love throughout the years. Stay Hungry is a crazy ripping song. Captain Howdy I thought was good. Price is one of the only ballads in history that I really, really love. Um, which I don't even know. I mean, can the Price really be considered a ballad? I mean, it picks up pretty good in that song. I mean, would you consider that a typical standard ballad of the 80s?
Well, for them it was. It actually
Yeah.
charted, hit number 108, so it was the third single released from the album and video. But I think a lot of people, I think the other two songs were just so big and they were spread apart perfectly, where the album didn't get, it seemed like a lot of albums from back in that time, 84 to 89, a lot of them, they were able to pull three, four, five singles off some albums. And, I don't know if you really had it on here. They had great songs on that album, don't get me wrong, but
Yeah.
as far as singles that were going to compete with, that you got to remember that's when Madonna was big. There was so many artists that were just huge in the 80s, and that's pretty much right around the time when hard rock just started to get noticed because Quiet Riot hit number one in late 83. So here you are a year later. So it did help them in the fact that, you know, they got a top 40 hit off this
Right.
album, and that was their only top 40 hit. So, but
Right.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of factors that went into play back then, and I think Twisted Sister was one of those bands that a lot of people really the image of the band scared people away. I really think it kind of did.
Really? Do you? Yeah, I guess for that
Yeah,
time period. For
because
that
they
time
they were
period, maybe
different.
it
They
did.
were different,
Yeah.
you know? And I
Yeah.
thought when I first saw them, I was a little hesitant, but then when I started really listening to the music, that's what got me sold on them. It wasn't really all about the image, it was more about the music, which is what it should always be about, but it never
Yeah,
always is.
definitely. I mean, it didn't, Burn in Hell is on Stay
Oh,
Hungry. To me,
great
that
song.
song is probably like the one of the heaviest in my opinion, given the lyrical content and just how crushing and sounds like it's tuned a lot lower than it actually is. I mean, that the way they played that thing on record was extremely gnarly, and I still think that's one of my favorite 80s produced songs is Burn in Hell. You can listen to that anytime. But yeah, that's my number two is Stay Hungry.
All right. And I'm going with number two is none other than You Can't Stop Rock and Roll. And like you mentioned, it came out in '83. It actually came out in the UK 2 months before. It was April, and then it came out in June in the US. So it took a while to really take hold. And actually, it was certified gold, but it didn't take gold until November of 1995.
Oh wow.
Yeah, but you gotta remember, a lot of those album sales were probably helped and aided by Stay Hungry and the
Sure.
fact that Stay Hungry, went triple platinum. So,
Cool.
um, and that was the problem with Come Out and Play. It didn't even ship platinum. Like a lot of bands of the '80s, if you ever look, usually after their big album, if they sold more than 1 million copies, that means platinum. They usually followed it up with a platinum, and that's what kept them rolling because it already shipped platinum a lot of the times. But the problem with Twisted Sister was it only went gold, and that was a big drop off in terms of
Right.
record sales and everything that Twisted Sister was trying to accomplish there. So, I mean, and nobody paid their dues as hard as they did, unfortunately. This band, you got to remember, they started way back in like 1972 was like the earliest incarnation of the band, and they just slogged
Playing
around
clubs.
in the clubs in New York
Yeah.
City for years.
Yep.
Dee Snider finally joined in '76. One by one, they got the initial main band there, but it just took a while. And the last one was, of course, AJ Pero, who finally joined in 1982. So I guess that was right around the time when everything all came together for them, and they really, it didn't take them long once those five guys got together, because by the
Sure.
time Stay Hungry came out, that they were a household name.
Yeah.
But to get to that point, it definitely put a lot of hard work in. So. All right, so You Can't Stop Rock and Roll only hit number 130 on the US charts. That's hard to believe because Under the Blade was on a independent label called Secret Records, and it they charted at 125. So we put them on Atlantic Records, a bigger label, and they 5 spots worse, which
Wow.
is which is weird. Yeah, you didn't really see that back in the day. Once they got on a major label, usually they were pumped and promoted, and if the album was any good, you'd see definitely an increase in record sales.
Well, like you
Um,
said, I think their image definitely made people wait a long time until they can accept them when they
mm,
started hearing the music, when they started putting out things like I Want to Rock and uh yeah, I think the videos helped with that presentation somewhat. Once they started putting out decent videos, I think that sort of helped a little bit, but people didn't know what to make of them at first, I think.
yeah. So like Kids Are Back kicks off the album in fine style. I Am I'm Me, what a phenomenal song that one is. Nothing like it when they cranked that one up live. And We're Gonna Make It, another good song that they played a lot in concert back in the day. And also Like a Knife in the Back, that was another classic track there.
Yeah, great
Just
song.
great songs. This album definitely deserved a much better fate. But, at least it went gold. At least they got a gold record out of it. They definitely deserved it. This album is another one of the cases where you can play it from beginning to end without really having to skip too much. I mean, there's only a few songs that I could care less for on it, so it's not bad at all. Unlike, some of the other albums of its time, you'll notice that maybe there's only two or three good songs on that album, but You Can't Stop Rock and Roll was definitely a solid album, no doubt. Hence it's number two for me.
Cool.
Number one, here we
All
go.
right. So my number one is the first one, Under the Blade, 1982, produced by Pete Way from UFO, which makes sense. I love UFO. I feel like the album, production wise, is very gritty and down and gnarly. I think more
Hmm.
so than the ones to follow, even Stay Hungry. And You Can't Stop Rock and Roll. I mean, you can I feel like the production is more gritty on Under the Blade. For the most part, like I said, I think the production on those first three are really great. But yeah, what you don't know is my number one favorite Twisted Sister song ever. I think it's the best opening song ever, period. If you don't hear that as number one, they're not playing the song, right? I mean, have you ever seen them play it where they didn't open with it?
I've only seen them twice, and they played it both times they
Yeah,
opened
they
with it.
opened with it both, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I mean, Destroyer, Shoot 'em Down, um, Run for Your Life is a great song. I'm surprised I haven't heard you mention that song. That is one of my favorite opening guitar riffs in it, is Run for Your Life. Um, yeah, and Under the Blade in itself is a very heavy, creepy song when you don't really know the context at first. That was interesting to like as a kid and bug my parents about what it was about because they didn't even know. They thought it was deeper than just like every parent did in that time period. They thought it was more sadistic than the song was actually about, which is about surgery. Um, so yeah, Under the Blade, I think has my favorite production, some of my favorite songs. Um, Most of those songs work live or could work live. Yeah, I was very, very surprised to see it as so low on your list. But what you said makes sense. When you have other albums, like when we do an Alice Cooper one or whatever, you'll see there's albums that people are going to go, "Are you serious? That's in your top five?" But so I get it. But yeah. So yeah, nice short catalog and ending with my number one with the first one. So yeah.
All right, and that's going to take me to my number one, which by now everybody will see it's none other than the biggest selling album in the band's career, the album that put them on the map, none other than Stay Hungry. And what a great album. Um, you know, and to tell you the truth, the songs that are more I Want to Rock and We're Not Going to Take It, they're probably, they're not even my favorite songs on the album. So that's
Right,
another reason.
exactly.
Yeah, and that's why the album is better than that because it's the song "Stay Hungry," "Burn in Hell" like you mentioned, "The Price," great song, and the closing track is the song that they actually dedicated to their fans because there was always a doubt, but there was never a doubt with the SMFs, no doubt
Yeah.
about it. That's the band, and if anybody knows what that stands for, it's none other than Sick Motherfuckers, and this is just
Yes, it is.
phenomenal band, and then that's the song they usually play every concert near the end too, as the encore. They'd come out and play that song, so it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Um, they always dedicated to their fans because they know without the fans were the ones that got helped get them where they are, where they ended up in the ranking of the music world. There, they got as big as they could. It's just unfortunate, that they couldn't, really make another regular studio album, even though they did get back together, like 2003 after being apart since '87. But it would have been nice to see them do one more album for the road or something, But unfortunately, you got the Christmas album, which, that doesn't count. But I'm talking about one more solid, new, all new material would have been great,
Yeah, definitely.
So, but yeah, they definitely, did a lot of damage in their, even though it feels like a short period of time they were around for, at least in the mainstream, but they were around for a long, long time because it took them so long to get to the point of where they became a household name. It's just that they were one of the ones for whatever reason they just never stayed there.